It was a warm May afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, in 2025, when JD Vance took the stage at a Republican rally. The 40-year-old American vice president was confident and provocative. "You know what's funny?" he said, drawing laughter from the audience. "These African countries are talking about sovereignty, about dignity. Man, half of them can't even get electricity to their capitals." The crowd roared with laughter. Vance continued, "And now this kid from Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, wants to lecture America, a country that's not even on the map. Please," he gestured dramatically. Burkina. I don't know how to say that place. It probably doesn't even have proper internet. Cameras caught every word, every smirk. Within seconds, excerpts of the speech were going viral on social media, with hashtags like Tron Vance Fees Africa across the Atlantic in Ouagadougou. It was 11 p.m. when Moussa Kabore, an aide to Ibrahim Traoré, received the notification on his cell phone. He watched the video 3 times before calling the president. "Mr. President, you need to see this urgently." Ibrahim, who was studying economic reports in his private office, answered immediately. "What happened, Moussa?" "US Vice President JD Vance just publicly mocked Burkina Faso, and you, President. It was very disrespectful." Ibrahim sighed after the episode with Kamala Harris. He had hoped that Americans had learned about mutual respect. Apparently he was wrong. "Send me the video and call a meeting for tomorrow morning. This time our response will be different." The next morning brought a wave of outrage that swept across the African continent. The video of JD Vance mocking Burkina Faso had spread like wildfire, sparking outrage in every African capital. Ibrahim Traoré was in his conference room at 6 a.m., accompanied by his cabinet. "Gentlemen, this time this is not just a diplomatic misunderstanding," he said, his face surcehil. "Ios, this is pure mockery and disrespect." Dr. Alphonse Ouedraogo, the foreign minister, was displaying the international reactions on his tablet. "Sir, we have received expressions of solidarity from 31 African countries. The president of Senegal called the comments a colonial insult. The South African leader spoke of American institutional racism. Fatoumata Sawado, the economy minister, added worrying data. Sir, since last night, 3 American investors have cancelled meetings. They are afraid of negative association." Ibrahim slammed his hand on the table. "That's exactly why we need to respond. Not for the sake of ego, but for the dignity of our people and the continent." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Trump was furious with his vice president. "Jay, what the hell were you thinking?" he shouted during a private meeting in the Oval Office. "We just fixed our relationship with Africa after the Kamala episode." Vance tried to defend himself. "Mr. President, it was just a joke to cheer up the public. I didn't think it would resonate so much." "Joke? The kid from Burkina Faso became a world hero after he elegantly destroyed Kamala. And you think you can make fun of him?" Trump shook his head. "You're going to have to clean up this mess yourself." Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was fielding calls from world leaders offering support. "Ibrahim, my brother," said Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, "all of Africa is after you again. How are you going to respond this time?" Ibrahim Traoré had spent the morning developing a strategy that was completely different from the elegant response he had given to Kamala Harris. This time, JD Vance had crossed a line that required a more direct and forceful approach. "Yakuba," he told his press secretary, "I want you to organize something special. This will not be a formal press conference. This will be something the world will never forget." Yakuba Sawado smiled. "What do you have in mind, President?" "A direct video recorded here in the palace. No filters, no excessive diplomacy. I will show this JD Vance who we really are." As the team prepared the recording, Ibrahim meticulously studied J. Vance's profile, a Yale graduate, the author of a book on American poverty, a senator from Ohio before becoming vice president. "Interesting," Ibrahim muttered. "He wrote about poverty, but he mocks countries that are overcoming poverty." In Washington, the White House was trying to do damage control. The press secretary faced a barrage of hostile questions from reporters. Does Vice President Vance stand by his statements? Will you apologize to Burkina Faso? How does this affect relations with Africa? The answers were evasive, revealing the administration's discomfort on American social media. The reaction was mixed. Trump supporters defended Vance. He only told the truth about these countries. But criticism also grew. What a shame. Mocking nations that are progressing. In Ohio, Vance's home state, universities organized debates about the episode. At Ohio State University, African students peacefully protested with signs, "Respect our leaders. Africa is no joke." Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim was finalizing his script. Ajara, his wife, was proofreading the text. "It's perfect," she said. "Firm but polite, sharp but respectful." This time, Ibrahim said, "I'm going to teach him a lesson he'll never forget, but without lowering our standards." At 3:00 p.m. in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré sat before the cameras in his presidential office. Behind him, the flag of Burkina Faso fluttered softly. He wore a smart dark suit and spoke directly to the camera with a confident smile. "Hello, Mr. JD Vance," he began, his tone calm but penetrating. "I watched your speech in Ohio, where you mocked Burkina Faso. First, thank you for giving me this opportunity to educate you publicly." The camera caught Ibrahim's every expression. "You said that our country doesn't even appear on the map. It's an interesting observation coming from someone who probably confuses Burkina Faso with Bangladesh." Ibrahim paused dramatically. "Let me help you with some basic geography. We are in West Africa, bordered by 6 countries, have 21 million people, and have existed longer than your country." He gestured to documents on his desk. "You made fun of our electricity. In the last 3 years, we have increased our energy production by 400%. Today, 89% of our population has access to electricity. Interestingly, Mr. Vance, in your state of Ohio, 340,000 people still live without reliable electricity." The data flashed on the screen as Ibrahim continued, "You made fun of our internet. Burkina Faso has 4G coverage across 94% of its territory. Our young people develop applications that are used in 12 African countries. Meanwhile, 21% of Ohio still does not have adequate access to broadband." Ibrahim leaned forward. "But what amazes me most, Mr. Vance, is your lack of knowledge of geography. You could not even pronounce Burkina Faso correctly, for an American vice president, that is. How can I put it politely? Embarrassing." He smiled wryly. "Maybe I should go back to Yale and take a world geography course. I hear it's a respectable school, although it apparently doesn't teach basic respect." Ibrahim Traoré continued his devastating response, now showing hard data that completely dismantled JD Vance's comments. "Mr. Vice President, since you like comparisons, let's compare." The screen displayed side-by-side graphs. Burkina Faso grew economically by 1% last year. Ohio grew by 3%. Our youth unemployment rate is 12%. Ohio's is 18%. Ibrahim gestured calmly. "You made fun of African countries that don't power their capitals. Ouagadougou has had 24-hour power for 2 years. Columbus has had 3 blackouts this month alone. Each piece of data was a direct hit to Vance's credibility. Let's talk about education. Since you went to Yale, we've built 200 schools in the last 3 years. Ohio has closed 150 schools in the same period." Ibrahim paused for impact. "You said we don't even have proper internet." "Mr. Advance, this video is being broadcast live from our own digital studio to 67 countries simultaneously. Our technology allows it." He smiled with growing confidence. "But let's get to the real issue, human outcomes. We've reduced infant mortality by 45%. We've increased life expectancy by 8 years. We've lifted 8 million people out of extreme poverty. The numbers kept rolling in, relentlessly. Ohio, with a budget 15 times ours, has failed to achieve commensurate results in any of these areas. Ibrahim leaned back in his chair. Mr. Vance, you've written a book about American poverty. Maybe you should write one about geographic ignorance, too. The camera caught Ibrahim's devastating smile. And since you mentioned that we're a place that doesn't even appear on a map, I'd like to point out that Burkina Faso exports gold, cotton, and agricultural technology to 34 countries, including some American states that buy our products without knowing where they come from. The response was surgical, educational, and completely humiliating to Vance. As Ibrahim Traoré's video spread like wildfire across the internet, reactions began to pour in instantly. In less than 2 hours, Ibrahim Traoré destroys Vance became a global trending topic, surpassing even sports and entertainment news. CNN correspondent Sarah Johnson tweeted, "Holy cow, Ibrahim Traoré just gave JD Vance the most educational beatdown in political history." Every fact checked out. The BBC's James Mitchell put it bluntly, "This is not just a response. This is a masterclass in how to dismantle ignorance with facts and dignity." At American universities, professors pause classes to show the video to students. At Harvard Kennedy School, the professor of international relations commented, "Gentlemen, you have just witnessed how diplomacy is done in the 21st century. In Washington, panic gripped the White House. Trump called an emergency meeting. Jay, you didn't just screw up. You destroyed the ball, the field, and the stadium," the president shouted. Vance, visibly shaken, tried to defend himself. "Mr. President, how was I supposed to know he had all this data? Because it's your job to know. Trump was red with rage. This kid just made you look like a complete amateur." American social media was abuzz with devastating memes. One montage showed Vance with the face of a student being reprimanded with the caption, "When you think you're smart, but Ibrahim Traoré is your teacher." In Ohio, Vance's political headquarters, the reaction was one of collective shame. The Columbus Dispatch newspaper ran an editorial. "Our vice president has embarrassed us worldwide. It's time for a public apology." Businessmen from Ohio, who had business in Africa, began to pressure Vance. "You have damaged our business relations with your tasteless jokes," complained a multinational CEO. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim received non-stop calls of congratulations. "French President Macron, mon ami, you have given a lesson in class and intelligence." 3 days after Ibrahim Traoré's devastating response, JD Vance was facing the biggest political crisis of his career. In his office in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, he watched the Burkina Faso president's video over and over, trying to find any inaccuracies in the data he was presenting. There were none. His top aide, Michael Stevens, came in with a stack of newspapers and a tablet full of devastating analyses. "Mr. Vice President, things are getting worse. The New York Times has published an editorial calling for your public retraction. The Wall Street Journal has questioned your foreign policy competence." Vance ran his hands nervously through his hair. "What about the Republicans? How is the party reacting?" "Divided, sir. Moderates are drifting apart. Marco Rubio said that disrespectful comments hurt our global influence. Even Tucker Carlson admitted that Traoré made you look unprepared." The situation was getting worse by the hour. On Fox News, conservative commentators were debating animatedly. "Look, I support Vance, but this guy really messed up," said Sean Hannity. "This Ibrahim Traoré guy has shown irrefutable data. It's embarrassing." At Ohio universities, students organized protests demanding that Vance stop embarrassing the state. At Ohio State University, a demonstration drew 3,000 people with signs that read, "Vance learned geography," and Burkina Faso, Vance's ignorance. The Ohio governor, under pressure from his base, issued a public statement. "As governor, I distance myself from the vice president's comments. Ohio has respectful relations with all nations. American business people with interests in Africa began canceling meetings with government officials. On Chevron, which had projects in African countries, issued a statement. We respect all of our African partners and regret any misunderstanding. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim continued to receive international support. The African Union issued a resolution of solidarity. 48 African countries signed a joint letter demanding Vance's formal retraction. President Traoré's response was exemplary, the AU Secretary-General said. A week after his public humiliation, JD Vance was facing the lowest point of his political career. Opinion polls showed his approval ratings plummeting from 52% to 31% in just 7 days. The Pew Research Center found that 67% of Americans considered his comments on Africa inappropriate and embarrassing. Trump summoned Vance to the Oval Office for a tense meeting. JD, you have become an international laughingstock. Yesterday, the British Premier harassed me if my vice president really doesn't know basic geography. Vance tried to defend himself. Mr. President, it was just a misunderstanding. I can fix it. Fix it, boy. You got ripped apart by a 36-year-old president with data that our own analysts have confirmed to be true. Trump pointed to the TV. Look at this. CNN was showing a comparison between Ohio and Burkina Faso by Harvard economists. All of Ibrahim's data was correct. Some Burkina Bay indicators were higher than those in Ohio. Mr. President, Vance said, sweating, what do you suggest? Humility, JD. Something Yale apparently didn't teach. Meanwhile, on TV shows, comedians made devastating jokes about Vance. On Saturday Night Live, the actor playing him was shown studying an atlas with a magnifying glass, saying, Burkina, where the hell is that place? The audience erupted in laughter. On social media, memes about Vance versus geography dominated. A viral video showed 10-year-olds locating Burkina Faso on a map faster than the American vice president could pronounce the country's name. At American universities, professors used the episode as an example of how not to do diplomacy. At Columbia University, international relations students analyzed Ibrahim's answer as a perfect case study in African soft power. In Ohio itself, Vance faced increasing hostility. At a public event in Cincinnati, protesters chanted, "Respect Africa." An African-American military veteran confronted him. "Sir, my ancestors came from Africa. Your comments were offensive." After 2 weeks of unbearable pressure, JD Vance finally relented. In a decision that surprised even his closest aides, he announced that he would make a formal public statement about the episode with Ibrahim Traoré. "I can't take it anymore," he told his wife Usha. "This Burkina Faso president has destroyed me gracefully. I have to swallow my pride." The White House had scheduled a special press conference for noon. Journalists from around the world gathered knowing that they would witness a historic moment. An American vice president being forced to publicly retract a humiliating address by an African leader. When Vance took the podium, his expression was one of utter defeat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I come here today to acknowledge that I made a serious mistake." His voice shook slightly. "My comments about Burkina Faso and its president, Ibrahim Traoré, were inappropriate, uninformed, and disrespectful." He paused, visibly embarrassed. "After reviewing the data presented by President Traoré, I must admit that he was correct on every point. Burkina Faso has made impressive progress that I was completely unaware of. The cameras captured every moment of the humiliation. President Traoré demonstrated superior knowledge of American data than I do of African data. This is unacceptable for someone in my position." Vance took a deep breath. "Therefore, I formally apologize to the people of Burkina Faso, to President Traoré, and to all Africans offended by my ignorant words." The inevitable question came from CNN's Sarah Johnson. "Vice President, how do you intend to repair this damage to U.S.-African relations?" "I will be traveling to Burkina Faso next week to apologize in person to President Traoré and to learn about the progress that I ignorantly mocked." The room erupted in murmurs. It was unprecedented. An American vice president traveling to apologize to a leader he had ridiculed. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim attended the news conference with his team. "He was brave to admit his mistake," he said magnanimously. "We will welcome him with dignity." Gad Vance's trip to Burkina Faso became one of the most closely watched diplomatic events of 2025. When Air Force Two landed in Ouagadougou, a curious crowd gathered to catch a glimpse of the American vice president who had been educated by their president. Ibrahim Traoré was waiting at the airport with characteristic dignity. When Vance stepped off the plane visibly nervous, Ibrahim walked up to him with a respectful smile. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, Mr. Vice President. We admire your courage in coming here." Vance, humble for the first time in years, replied,